January 14th, 2025. It's a date that will forever be etched in human history. The day the world stood still and stared at the sands of Egypt. I was there at the Giza necropolis. Dr. Eris Thorne, a historian, not a physicist. My life's work was deciphering hieroglyphs, not energy signatures. Yet, there I was, alongside the world's greatest scientific minds, watching the impossible unfold. It started with a low hum, a vibration that seemed to emanate from the very bedrock of the earth. Tourists' phones began to flicker and die. Then, the Great Pyramid of Khufu began to glow. Not a reflection of the sun, but a soft, internal luminescence, as if a long-dormant heart was beating back to life. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as golden light traced the ancient seams of the massive stones. Before anyone could process it, a colossal beam of pure white energy erupted from the pyramid's apex, piercing the sky with silent, breathtaking force. It wasn't an explosion. It was a declaration. Every satellite, every space agency, every government turned their eyes to Giza. The beam was a perfect column of light, impossibly stable, shooting straight out into the cosmos. It wasn't radioactive, it wasn't thermal, it was something else, something new. The world's top physicists were baffled. General Markarov, the stoic head of the newly formed Global Task Force, had one question for me, his voice tight with urgency. "Thorne, what does history say about this? Are there any legends, any myths, anything?" My mind raced through decades of research. I thought of the countless texts that spoke of the pyramids as resurrection machines or stargates. We'd always dismissed them as poetic hyperbole, the fanciful imaginings of a bygone era. Global communications were a mess. Power grids flickered, and a palpable tension gripped the planet. Theories flew wildly. Was it a weapon? A distress signal? An invitation? My team and I worked around the clock, deep within the Cairo Museum, re-examining every scroll, every tablet, every inscription that had ever been found near the pyramid. We were looking for a key, a Rosetta Stone for this impossible event. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young intern named Lena, usually tasked with cataloging pottery shards, pointed to a small, overlooked panel from a lesser-known tomb. The hieroglyphs were archaic, pre-dynastic. They didn't depict gods or pharaohs, but patterns of stars and what looked like circuitry. At the center was the symbol for the Great Pyramid, but with an addition we'd never seen before. A glyph representing heart or consciousness placed directly inside it. And beneath it, a repeating phrase: "When the Sky Brothers return, the stone heart will awaken to greet them." Sky Brothers. It was a term found in a few obscure texts, always assumed to be a reference to a nomadic tribe or a forgotten cult. But what if it meant something more literal? What if the ancients weren't just observing the stars, but expecting visitors from them? This wasn't just a power source, it was a welcome beacon, a cosmic lighthouse built thousands of years ago, patiently waiting for a ship to come home. As I presented this to General Markarov and the Global Council, the mood in the room shifted from fear to awe. We were staring at the legacy of our ancestors, a plan so grand, so patient, it defied comprehension. They hadn't built a tomb for a king. They had built a handshake across millennia. Then, exactly 2 weeks after the beam appeared, it happened. The SETI arrays, which had been aimed at the beam's trajectory, picked up a signal. It wasn't a language of words, but of pure mathematics. Prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, the value of Pi, universal greeting card from an intelligence that knew how to say hello to another species of thinkers. They were answering the call. They were coming. The world held its breath. The approaching object, massive and elegant, entered our solar system. It didn't look like our clunky spaceships. It was organic, almost alive, glowing with the same soft golden light as the pyramid. As it settled into a high Earth orbit, a new message came through. Not in math, but in images. It showed a flourishing civilization among the stars, then a catastrophic cosmic event, dying star, a homeworld in peril. It showed ships fleeing, scattering across the galaxy. It showed one of those ships, damaged, crashing on a young green and blue planet millennia ago. And then it showed the survivors. Beings of light, their forms ethereal and graceful, interacting with the early, primitive humans of the Nile Valley. They weren't conquerors, they were teachers. They shared knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and architecture. The images were clear. The ancient Egyptians hadn't been enslaved to build the pyramids. They had been partners. The pyramid wasn't just a beacon, it was a promise. A promise that one day the descendants of those who stayed would come looking for the descendants of those who were saved. The final image was a map of the human heart, followed by a simple, profound question that bloomed in the minds of every person on the planet. Simultaneously, in their own native language, have you been good to each other? That question broke the world. Not with violence, but with a wave of collective introspection. Have we been good to each other? In our frantic, divided world, teetering on the brink of self-destruction, the answer was a painful, resounding no. The beings in orbit weren't here to judge us, but to ask us to judge ourselves. The energy beam from the pyramid wasn't just power. It was a mirror reflecting our own humanity back at us. What happened next was the true miracle. It didn't start in the halls of power, but on the streets. Spontaneous ceasefires broke out in war-torn regions. People began sharing food with their neighbors. Old rivals in business and politics started talking, not about what they could gain, but what they could give. The question, "Have you been good to each other?" became a global mantra. It was painted on walls, shared online, and whispered in prayers. It was a planetary moment of clarity. We were one people, living on one fragile world, and we had forgotten the most basic instruction. The Sky Brothers didn't need to land. They had already delivered their most powerful message. They had reminded us of our shared heart. I stood again at the base of the Great Pyramid, which now glowed with a gentle, steady pulse. The beam was gone. The ship in orbit remained a silent, watchful guardian. General Markarov stood beside me, his usual stern expression replaced with one of quiet wonder. He looked at me and said, "Thorn, all my life I've been trained to fight enemies. But they didn't come as enemies. They came as a conscience." The Great Pyramid didn't just power up in 2025. It powered us, up. It reawakened a potential not of technology, but of compassion. The ancients didn't just build a monument of stone. They built a monument to hope. A testament to the idea that no matter how far we wander, no matter how lost we become, we can always find our way home by simply choosing to be good to one another. That is the greatest power in the universe. And it was inside us all along. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it. Let's keep asking that question. Follow for more stories that connect our past to our future.